Back for Blood is a game.
You should have brought more tanks with you.
That's really it. You can stop watching now and form your own opinions on that statement, and you'll pretty much have it figured out. But if you want to stick around for the long, drawn-out explanation on why I think this beta, if it is in any way indicative of what the final product will be like, is not worth buying, stick around, then I'll bore you for probably somewhere between 20 minutes to a half hour. Let's get one thing out of the way immediately. I am going to make a lot of comparisons between Back 4 Blood and Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 throughout the course of this. The three main reasons I'm going to do this is because 1, Left 4 Dead is the only zombie game I have ever played and enjoyed. 2, frankly, the gameplay elements, structure, and design of this game and Left 4 Dead are so similar that to not compare them would be criminal. And 3, Back 4 Blood is being marketed in what I find to be a very ham-fisted way as the spiritual successor of the Left 4 Dead franchise. So, getting right into it, I want to start with what this game so far does right. Firstly, while the gunplay is nothing spectacular in its own right, I think it is a notable improvement from what we had in Left 4 Dead. There's nothing really special or impressive about it beyond the fact that it feels satisfying to play with and by comparison makes the gunplay of Left 4 Dead feel and look clunky. There's probably some idiom or Old Testament saying that I'm forgetting here about how it's impossible to perfect what's already been perfected or something, but all I'm trying to say is the gunplay feels very generic. Generic yet smooth and satisfying. The animations are nice, and the weapon selection is leaps and bounds better than Left 4 Dead. Something that I always disliked about those games was the guns and their designs, which, granted, it was 2009 and Valve was still riding high on the Orange Box branch of Source, and back then things like sick graphics and smooth animations weren't as big a deal as they are now, but something about it always bothered me even back then. That, and the actual weapon choice. You were notably more limited in Left 4 Dead 1 with the whopping total of fucking 6 firearms you had to choose from versus the 16 in Left 4 Dead 2. Back 4 Blood blasts both titles out of the water with the whopping 27 weapons it has, not counting melee weapons in either case, because I can't find a list of melee weapons that were in Left 4 Dead 1, and I'm too lazy to reinstall it to figure it out. Even then, however, the weapon choice of Back 4 Blood, like the gunplay, is also very generic. This has been pointed out by others already, but I'll reiterate. There's an M16, there's an M4, there's an AK, a SCAR, MP5, AA-12, Remington 870, it's all just very baseline stuff, but I'm not going to look at that as a bad thing because at this point in the life cycle of not just games like this, but all first-person shooters, as I just said, it's just a baseline. If you're making a first-person shooter, weapon diversity isn't a bad thing, but at this point it is a fundamental building block of the development process to have, or have at least considered, incorporating one of the weapons I just mentioned. Another thing this game does decently enough is the level design and atmosphere. The problem here is I just wish we got to experience more of it. I'll go more into that problem here in a little bit, but let's just focus on the good for now. The level design is superb. You can absolutely see where the environmental design of Left 4 Dead 2 has influenced the game's creative direction in this regard. The crescendo events are inventive and refreshing after the mostly rinse-repeat formula the Left 4 Dead games managed to output, something that the community, I feel, tried time and time again to scratch the itch for with modded campaigns and ended up doing decently well more often than not. But let me talk about the most inventive, most outstanding thing this game has added to the mix: the card system. The card system is absolutely innovative and crucial to the gameplay loop. Every choice you and your team make can make or break the outcome of a run, and you can really feel it. Certain cards do very specific things, others give passive buffs, and some can be useless early on, but make all the difference in the long run. Overall, it's a really great example of game balance that I think more games could stand to learn from. Truly, it's something that's better to be experienced than explained, and I hope that everyone watching had the chance to get a feel for it before the beta ended. Lastly, and I will inevitably contradict myself later on here, the design of the zombies is pretty cool in some places. From the snitch to the ogre, you can tell just by looking at these things that every monster in this game was an absolute labor of love. The people who made this game had absolutely the best intentions at heart, and I genuinely believe that. I believe that whoever it was that sat down, playtested this, developed it, or showed it to a PR team and they finally hit the big red spiritual successor button had nothing but the best in mind for this game and its future, and nothing but respect for the community they hoped it would form and the community from which it would draw the largest majority of its player base. Remember earlier when I said that I was going to compare this game to Left 4 Dead a lot? Okay, well here comes the point where I do that 10 times more because of this phrase and this phrase alone. Spiritual successor. At any point during the development cycle, they could have called this game anything else besides a spiritual successor. Frankly, they would have had just as much success using the fact that Turtle Rock Studios, the people who developed Left 4 Dead, if you're unaware by this point, were also the ones developing this game, another zombie game, as a selling point. At that point, it would have been implied that they were making something at the very least in the same vein or style as Left 4 Dead. Instead, by marketing the game as a spiritual successor, they are openly displaying, if only in spirit alone, the developers of this game believe that they have not only constructed something to challenge the Left 4 Dead games, but that they have built something to surpass them. And doing this in the face of one of the original 4 titans of Valve, that's no easy feat to accomplish. So that said, going into this game, I set the bar really, really high. I fell prone to overhyping myself on games way too soon before and have been burned several times. Notably, Wolfenstein Youngblood comes to mind in that regard, but that said, I was ready for this game to not live up to my expectations, and so far it hasn't. Okay, I understand that it's just a beta, but we are just under 2 months from release, and most, if not all of the problems I'm about to cover cannot feasibly be corrected in that time. With the game being this close to release, aside from the technical issues and other weird bugs I encountered during the playtest, as far as I'm concerned, we are looking at the final product of this game. We are looking at what this game is going to be like at launch. That said, let's look at the problems of this beta. Firstly, I'll start off by talking about the game stylistically. Time to get canceled on Twitter. This game is to Left 4 Dead what Fortnite is to PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Okay, you follow me? No? Good. Graphically, I found the game appealing but unremarkable in a lot of ways. From the foliage to the random assets you encounter as you move through the game, nothing seems wildly detailed or very sharp looking, I guess. Allow me to speak candidly. Most of the models in the game look like they were pulled off the Unity asset store. That's not to deny the effort that was put into any of this. I don't 100% dislike the way everything looks. It's just some things in the game I found either looked too smooth, too shiny, or sometimes just almost untextured. Some things felt right at home, others felt oddly out of place. Continuing on the note of style, let's talk about that atmosphere. The atmosphere was fucking great. Loved it. Honestly, if there was anything from this game that really hit home with me and reignited some of that nostalgia I get from playing old Valve games, it was Back 4 Blood's atmosphere. Here's the problem though. For all the good the atmosphere does for this game, we don't get to experience it nearly enough or for long enough. Back 4 Blood has managed to trade atmosphere for non-stop action. You can definitely see where the influence of the level design comes into play, but in some of the right and wrong ways. Chief of which, in this instance, is the fact that you never have those few precious seconds of downtime to take a minute and actually fucking look around. Take, for comparison, Left 4 Dead 2 Swamp Fever. In one section of this campaign, spoiler warning, you're walking around in a swamp evading hordes of the undead as you make your way through the deep south of America on a seemingly endless quest to find safety. Between times, there's these points of tension where you can feel the game building toward the next fight. There's scarcely any zombies around. You might see 1 or 2 special infected, hear their respective little jingles as they spawn, but that's about it. All the while, you hear the sounds of the forest floor around you and the subtle groans in the distance of something no longer human as the eerie music sets in on you, setting the tone. In Back 4 Blood, if you take your eyes off an infected for more than 1 second, you're going to lose valuable health immediately and chances are somehow trigger a horde. As I said earlier on, you can definitely see the influence that the Left 4 Dead games had on the level design of this game. I just wish we got to see more of it. And I think the best way to remedy this right now would be to make the levels longer. Take, for example, this loading dock area from the end of the first map. You're moving across the rooftops of abandoned semis on your way to the safe room, traversing over makeshift bridges survivors long before you have left behind on their hopeless flight from Evansburg. The ridden growl and snarl below you as you move along, carefully avoiding the murders of crows roosting on the path ahead, threatening to alert a horde with one wrong misstep. And then it's just over. That section is completely gone. The safe room's right there, just go on in. And while I'm at it, there's no real looming crisis in this area either. The Ridden are constantly climbing up the sides of the containers, and if you were to unfortunately fall off, there's conveniently placed stacks of boxes and crates, damn near in the shape of literal staircases for you to climb back up on. This area alone could have been so much more if it was just one, simply just about 2 times the size and more maze-like. 2, the Ridden could not climb up to the tops of the semis, and 3, there was a secondary path for you to follow in case you fell or got knocked off that was inherently more challenging to traverse due to the hordes of Ridden trapped in the areas below. There really isn't any need to change the way the birds work or their positioning. The only big change needed in that case is the Ridden horde needs to come from behind to suddenly turn what should have been almost a tightrope walk to the safe room into a terrifying wind sprint. But you don't get that. Instead, you get some birds, a constant barrage of Ridden and special Ridden, and conveniently placed staircases just in case you fall off. Still, even if my pipe dream version of this one specific area were reality, it still wouldn't matter because, as I said earlier, if you take your eyes off an infected for more than 1 second, you're gonna lose valuable health immediately. That said, allow me to segue into the balancing issues this game has. They are numerous, and unfortunately easily one of the most poignant issues this game has. I've said it once, I'll say it again. If you take your eyes off of a Ridden for more than a second, bother to let your guard down and inspect your environment, make the mistake of thinking that they're too far away to hit you and you're going to lose health that will be invaluable later on. The ratio of heals versus the amount of damage that Ridden, and specifically mutated Ridden, deal is, I feel, in no way balanced. Again, healing items are wildly scarce and don't heal nearly enough for the amount of damage the Ridden do per every encounter. Oh shit, did I say every encounter? My bad, I meant constantly. The Ridden never fucking stop. They are constantly coming at you, and the mutated ones take so much ammo to kill, you're unlikely to have enough ammo left in your mag to deal with the sometimes 30 to 40 common Ridden running at you while screaming. Let's get a bit more technical about it. In Left 4 Dead 2, there were 4 basic healing items: the first aid kit, the defib, pain pills, and the adrenaline shot. Per every safe room, you were given up to 8 first aid kits, the first set of 4 to heal the damage incurred from the map you just went through, and the second set of 4 spawning after the new map loads in to take with you through the next area. Sometimes there were extra heals such as the pills or the shot laying around too, but it was rare. Additionally, in those games you were able to carry not 1, but 2 healing items at base, a med kit and a temporary healing item. In Back 4 Blood, you can carry a total of 1 healing item at base, with the potential of 2 and I believe possibly more if you or your teammates choose the right cards. This aspect of the game isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just that the healing items you're presented with don't heal nearly enough. The pills temporarily restore only 40 health, while the bandages heal only 25 health, and the medkit restores 50. This, and the fact of how much all of these items cost in the long run, is not a good mix and led me and my teammates more often than not to either repeatedly fail at the tail end of a mission or during a crescendo event, or be so low on health and ammo by the time we made it to a safe room that it was a toss-up between do we want to shoot thing or live longer in the next area. Almost always the answer was shoot thing, but the scarce few times we ended up picking the latter option, it really didn't end up mattering in the long run because, as I said before, Special Ridden are ridiculously strong and deal way too much damage. I'm specifically talking about the exploders here. The amount of times that I near full mag dumped one of these bastards from a good distance away and still either got vomited on or hit hard by their explosion effect, losing chunks of health from both at a time, was frankly fucking ridiculous. Combine this with the fact that unlike Left 4 Dead, multiple of the same type of special ridden can spawn at the same time, it was a recipe for several failed runs due to lack of funds to purchase sufficient healing items and healing items that did not restore sufficient health to muscle through the rest of the level. The best solution to this I can think of is to firstly make healing items cheaper and secondly allow cleaners to carry more healing items without the need to use up a card slot. Preferably, I'd suggest do both and also increase the value of health the items restore. Also, while I'm on the subject, the game either feels like it has some rough hit registration issues sometimes, or the weak points on special ridden just do not incur nearly enough damage for it to be noticeable. Also, while I'm on the subject, the game either feels like it has some rough hit registration issues, or the weak points on special ridden just do not incur nearly enough damage for it to be noticeable. As I just said, many times I found myself mag dumping into the weak points of exploders only for them to take nearly a full mag to kill. There's also the fact that half the time you can't really differentiate, or at least I couldn't tell, the difference between normal flesh and the weak spots of ridden. Something else worth pointing out here is the fact that special ridden view everything from third person, and it is ridiculously easy to just hide behind literally any solid asset and lay waste to the cleaners once they get close. I think a good way to balance this out would be a combination of 1 or 3 things. 1. Cleaners should deal more damage. 2. Ridden should have less health in general. 3. Make the weak points more noticeable. They don't need massive headlights on their bodies, but they should be notably standing out from the rest of the color palette. Since I brought up hit registration, I guess I'll also go ahead and talk about the netcode issues. Simply put, everything in the game, no matter what ping you're on, looks like it's being rendered in 10 FPS. I asked multiple people about this just to check if it was only me, but no, apparently other people encountered this consistently as well. I can't really fathom what would be causing this, but I find it kind of concerning that this close to release, this kind of shit is still happening. So laggy, like, okay, wait, how do I view... 50 fucking ping, and this is how laggy the game is. Look at this, it looks like things are moving in 10 FPS. What the fuck? 5 FPS. It's a really odd issue, and one I can't really speak for, as when it comes to the technical side of games like this, I have no idea what's going on. All I'm doing here is pointing it out. I just find this really strange, and it really pulled me out of the experience and made interacting with the world space difficult at times. While we're on the topic of things that took me out of the game, let's also quickly cover the characters and design choices made for those characters. This is one of the biggest reasons why earlier on I said this game is to Left 4 Dead what Fortnite is to PUBG. Simply put, it's the twins from Wolfenstein Youngblood all over again. The Blazkowicz twins from Youngblood were remarkably quirky. Their interests were obscure, their sense of humor was unusual, and felt very disconnected from reality.
Gobsmacked off. Forsooth, Kenneth.
Battery for that laser device secured, Jess.
Cadillac when Arthur fell into the moat of the evil Scotsman's castle, in the case of the curious chameleon. Hilarious and educational.
That, and one of their only key personality traits being cursing at in-fucking opportune moments and making really unfunny quips, ended up taking me out of the game rather than building my connection to either character. The same thing can be said for every character that I played in Back 4 Blood, those being Hoffman, Evangelo, and Holly. I know I'm drawing parallels between characters from completely unrelated games, but bear with me. Just like the Blazkowicz twins, the characters in this game's dialogue has either been geared toward a younger audience or a misguided attempt at being somehow relatable through sheer weird factor. The wisecracks that the characters in the Left 4 Dead games made were never necessarily comedy gold, but they had their own charm to them and added to their characters. I can see that the same thing has been attempted here, but just not executed very well.
If I find a jar of pickles, it'll make my millennium.
What?
What?
Rather than these random quips making me feel closer to the characters, the only thing it's done in the long run is make the characters feel very socially disconnected. which is unfortunate because looking at the designs of these characters, you can see the time and effort that went into perfecting all of these things, only for the dialogue to cause them to fall flat. That, and the fact that every time you accidentally shoot another cleaner, they sound like they're genuinely pissed at you rather than just something like,
"There's gonna be some biblical shit happening to you if you do that again,"
only serves to further alienate the player from these personalities. Moreover, while I found the actual appearance and outfit designs of the characters to be upstanding, the fact that there will be further customization options down the road will most likely kill everything that's good about the designs of the characters if the devs play it wrong. If only in this regard, I hope I am dead wrong about that Fortnite to PUBG comparison. Speaking of designs, a few minutes ago I mentioned that I'd most likely contradict myself at some point when speaking on the designs of the Ridden. Here's that point. I said previously that you could tell in the design of every single one of the Ridden and Special Ridden it was a labor of love. But at the same time, they're just really uninspired. Every zombie in this game is pretty generic when compared to other games, and the Special Ridden, for all the inventive things that have been done with them, they lack subtlety. What I mean here is take the Stinger, for example. It's this game's answer to the Hunter, but this time it has 4 arms, which is cool, I guess. Makes sense, given the way it attacks the player and maneuvers throughout the world space, but the way those extra arms actually connect to its body, there's really just nothing there. It's mostly just smooth flesh with a damaged spot in the back, which I'm guessing is supposed to represent where the new set of arms connected to the shoulder blades of the original victim, or the Breaker, a kind of mini-boss type enemy that I think creatively was supposed to originally look like it was composed of a fuck ton of bone fragments, but now looks like it's just a bunch of pieces of rock that have been slammed together. With other variant specials like the Tall Boys, even looking at the pictures of these things on the wiki, the only real discernible difference between them seems to be the location of their weak point. Honestly, it makes me curious as to what the original concept art of these things looked like. Look, I could sit here and nitpick all the little things I find wrong with each and every single enemy design in this game, but we can sum it up just as we have most other things. Uninventive where it counts. Again, the designs are good, they could just be better. Earlier on, I briefly spoke about the game's atmosphere and the problems it has with setting the tone of the game, mostly due to the constant onslaught of the Ridden not allowing enough time to take in the setting and turning the levels into a constant mad dash for the safe room. One of the problems with the atmosphere, or occasional lack thereof, is the soundtrack. The soundtrack of the Left 4 Dead games was extremely memorable. You're listening to it right now. Even over a decade later since the last official release of a title, you can recognize the signature 3 chords in pretty much any form. The soundtrack of Back 4 Blood is, by comparison, virtually non-existent. Not to get vitriolic, but the soundtrack was so functionally unremarkable that until I actually bothered to look up the isolated main menu theme and give it a listen, that I realized that it's actually somewhat similar to the original soundtrack. Whereas Left 4 Dead 2 seemed to focus on a more almost jazz/bluegrass sounding style, the Back 4 Blood theme seems to be more country-oriented, which makes sense because I believe it's set in the American Midwest, whereas Left 4 Dead 2 was set in the Southwest United States, most notably New Orleans. But as I was saying, the soundtrack of Back 4 Blood is unnoteworthy and doesn't have any real presence in the game. I want you to stop and think for a moment. Think about all the sounds that make up the sound design of the Left 4 Dead 2 games. The short jingles signaling the spawning of special infected, the short 3 notes from that recognizable trumpet signaling the coming of a random horde, the quickening rhythm of the combat music as you fight that horde. Now, if you took the time to play the beta, I want you to try to recall any of those same elements of the game's sound design. Can't? Cool, because I can't either, because as I said before, the soundtrack has virtually no presence in the game. Also, this is mostly a pet peeve of mine, but Back 4 Blood is also one of several games in recent years to have followed the same formula of incorporating these loud, popping gurgles of blood and flesh into their sound design. There's examples of this everywhere. Gears of War 4 and 5, Halo 5 to a small extent. Even the unreleased Callisto Protocol, which we haven't even seen gameplay for yet, has done it. I don't find it to be necessarily a bad direction for the sound design of these games. I just find it to be needlessly over the top. Overall, the game doesn't feel like a AAA flagship title, and it definitely doesn't feel like a comeback from the unfortunate nightmare that was Evolve. This feels like a pipe dream indie dev project in the same vein as things like Hunt Down the Freeman. Not to say that Back 4 Blood is anywhere near as bad as Hunt Down the Freeman, just that it feels like a creative vision that has come to some unfortunate level of fruition that's just enough to call a fully fledged game, but not nearly enough to warrant calling it a spiritual successor to anything, much less the fucking titan that was the Left 4 Dead games. I wasn't expecting a Left 4 Dead clone, but honestly, the game might have been better off if that's just what it did. I appreciate the new things they've attempted to do, and while most of it is actually pretty decently good, this game still does not top Left 4 Dead 1 or 2 by any means. Frankly, it didn't leave any lasting impressions on me, and while I really wanted to like this game, I doubt I'll be buying it at launch. That's not to say I won't buy it ever, but as it stands, if the current build is in any way indicative of the final product on release, this is not a product worth the $60 price tag they're asking, and especially is not worth the $100 they're asking for the Ultimate Edition. Bottom line, too long didn't listen, whatever. The game does not function well as a spiritual successor, and attempting to call it that is just Turtle Rock shooting themselves in the foot. In fact, several times during my playthrough, I ended up thinking to myself, man, I'd really rather be playing Left 4 Dead right now. Don't get me wrong here, I'm not trying to spew unfounded vitriol about this or tell you you shouldn't try it for yourself and form your own opinions. You absolutely should do that regardless of everything that I've said here. All I'm saying is I didn't enjoy it and I wouldn't recommend it to a friend if they asked about it. Final judgment, 4 out of 10. It's undercooked, but even if a delay pushed back to Christmas happened, I still doubt it'd be enough time to fix everything the game currently has wrong with it. Thanks for watching. If you disagree, feel free to tell me why in the comments. Also, check out my gameplay video, which should be on screen right about here. If you want to see my friends doing a bunch of weird shit while I watch helplessly from the sidelines more often than not, click here. If you want to watch me and my brother Gygax be absolute dipshits through Dead Space 3, click here. If you want to see me stumble my way through the dark for 3.5 hours in Resident Evil 8, click here. Leave a like, subscribe, DMCA me for using the soundtrack of a decade-old first-person shooter, whatever. Peace.